Stakeholder Engagement Panel. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Stephanie Clements. Stephanie is with the Tropical Audubon Society, and she is their Education and Advocacy Director. So Stephanie?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Is this working? Okay. All right. What an awesome day this has been so far today. I'm Dr. Stephanie Clements. I'm the Education and Advocacy Director at Tropical Audubon Society. So I just wanted to tell you a bit about what we do before I introduce our first speaker of the panel. So our mission at Tropical Audubon Society is to protect and restore South Florida ecosystems, focusing on birds, other wildlife, and their habitats. So this is, of course, why we are so excited to be a part of the summit here today, because Biscayne Bay is so important to us and to the birds and other wildlife who rely on it. One of my roles at Tropical Audubon Society is to run the Tropical Audubon Ambassador Program. This is an adult education and advocacy training program. We do have a high school edition coming this summer too, which I'm very excited about. And in this program, we teach about the Everglades, Pine Rocklands, and of course, Biscayne Bay. So in this program, we help members of our community learn the power of their voices. So this teaches us how we can advocate for the environments that we care about, like Biscayne Bay. So I know I am already in a room full of Bay advocates, and we would absolutely love to have some of you join us in our Tropical Audubon Ambassador Program this coming fall. At Tropical Audubon, we also do a bunch of other stuff like advocate to protect the Bay. So you can check out the conservation science panel in the next session for more on that. Education initiatives with local students, conservation-themed events, birding field trips, and so much more. So if you would like to learn more about the Ambassador Program or any of the other things that we do at Tropical Audubon, check out our website at tropicalaudubon.org. So now, without further ado, I would like to introduce the first speaker of this session, Michael Borboya, PhD student at Florida International University. Thank you, Michael, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. My slides should be up anytime now. Well, I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Michael. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I'm a PhD student at, hello. Hi. Well, I'm a PhD student at FIU, and I'm in my third year, and my project is focusing on fishing efforts in the Miami River. And it's very much a social approach to a social problem and ecological problem. And it's a interdisciplinary project that involves methodologies from both ecological and social fields. And you'll see it very shortly. All right. Thank you. All right. So the name of the project is called Against the Current, the experiences and perceptions of fishers along the Miami River, Florida. So historically, the Miami River supplied Biscayne Bay with fresh water directly from the Everglades. But over the years, as development has increased significantly in downtown Miami, the Miami River has changed as well. Instead of being connected to the Everglades, it's now connected to Lake Okeechobee. So from Lake Okeechobee, it brings a lot of nutrients. And along the way, coursing directly through downtown Miami, it picks up a lot of other stuff. So instead of being a source for fresh water, it's now known more so as a point source for pollution. But it has many other uses besides this sad role. An unexpected role for the Miami River is fishing. So urban fishing is a unique ecological field because it's made up of more diverse groups than fishing efforts in more natural areas. And also, when fishing in urban systems, you come into contact more with anthropogenic pollutants and things of that sort. Fishing is a primary contact activity that, when looking at it from the social and ecological context, it directly connects the two systems together. So yes, the Miami River is an urban river, but why is fishing unexpected? I mean, we're in Miami. We have such big fisheries in Biscayne Bay and out in the Atlantic Ocean. Why is it unexpected? Well, one thing, in City of Miami parks, fishing is not allowed, and that's one of the few public access areas in the Miami River. Much of the Miami River is dominated more so by private property, and as you can see, the public would not have access to these areas to fish. Making matters even worse, even efforts to promote public access to the Miami River with projects like the Miami River Greenway, these projects have been successful in facilitating public access, but things like fishing have been left out and have fallen through the cracks. This is because most of the Miami River Greenway is managed by the adjacent private landowners rather than public entities. And as you can see on that map, the only areas that are unmanaged and allow people to fish freely are the red areas. And as you can see, there really aren't many. There's one up at the top, one in the middle, and one near the mouth. So the main questions that I wanted to answer with this project is, how do fishers perceive and experience the Miami River, Florida? I wanted to determine their motivations, the barriers they face, and their concerns that they had for the river and the greater Miami River area. So for this study, I took more of a social approach, and instead of conducting like a normal survey, I conducted more of an ethnography. And to do so, I went to these public access areas, and I did a lot of participant observation hours and semi-structured surveys. So for these participant observation hours, I would go to these sites, I would fish with the fishers of the Miami River, and I would just interact with them. It was very informal, and I spent so many hours at the Miami River in the heat of the summer, in the cold of the winter, and I would fish with these people over the course of 2 years, well, a year and a half, and I would gather information on their practices and their behavior and their perceptions. Later, I would transcribe the many notes that I took, and I would code them using NVivo, using open coding to identify any dominant themes or topics that came up in interviews and in observation notes. So first, I'll talk to you a little bit about the site-specific findings, and then I'll branch out into the more general findings. So for the first primary area that I'll be covering is the Miami River Rapids Mini Park area. So this area, most of the participants were actually unhoused and lived at the site. And expectedly so, the income for most of the fishers was extremely low. And most of the fishing occurred under the 27th Avenue Bridge. There was no fishing signage in terms of regulations or consumption advisories at this site. At the Jose Manatee Park area, most of the participants lived nearby and either walked to the site or rode their bike to the site. Again, this site was low income, but it was a little bit better off than the Miami River Rapids site. And adjacent park management, there's no direct fisheries management, but the park management, which resides right next to the site, keeps fishers from going inside the premises, but nobody's really monitoring what they're catching. And then at Miami Circle Park, majority of the fishers live nearby, but in stark contrast, it's very high income individuals who live in downtown Miami in these condominiums and apartments. So again, there's no fishing regulation, there's no management at the site, but the private property managers keep people in the unmanaged areas where they can fish. In this case, it's Miami Circle Park. So in terms of some of the findings for motivations, we found one dominant thing, which was emotional. So a lot of people fished because they thought of fishing as an incredible sensation, a pure adrenaline, but some people went even deeper. And one person said, with my father being deceased, it connects me to him. I got him on my mind when I'm out here, and it's very peaceful, it's therapeutic. Another aspect that we touched on was that it's a very vital provisional service for many people who fish. Most of the people who I interviewed, said that the fish that they catch there, it goes straight to the kitchen, and that they fry it and they eat it with maduros. And yeah, that picture there is the catch of one of the fishers that texted me after our interview. And as you can see, there's a lot of fish. And there's also a very strong social presence at these sites and social benefits that people derive from fishing at these sites. Fishers, they tended to support one another with bait, tips for fishing, and just general support. A lot of people made their best friends fishing at these sites and hold strong connections to this day. In terms of barriers to access, there are many. One prominently being the legal aspect, which is that private property managers do not allow people to fish. If they do fish in these areas, they face the potential of police interactions. And the same goes for public parks. If public park sees you fishing on their property, they quickly send security to get you off the premises. And for many of the people who are fishing in these areas who are low-income minority groups, police interaction is something that they try to attend very severely. So one barrier to access is the physical and spatial constraint. So though development has been booming and they've been managing to turn this into a positive aspect by requiring new developments to build Miami River Greenway, this expansion of the Greenway and private management has been constricting fishing access to smaller and lower quality spots. So for instance, this picture right there in the middle, that's one of the most popular fishing sites. It holds up to 14 people at maximum, but there's a new apartment being constructed right next to it that is set to close it off completely to the public within the next year. And a big financial barrier to access is simply just purchasing and buying fishing equipment and bait, which can be a significant barrier for the people who are unhoused and living at the site, for example, but they manage to get by using the support systems that they have built over the years. And things like parking fees stop people from visiting these sites who are low income and are looking to fish to remediate some of their food or financial insecurity. So across participants, the primary concern was access. So this was mostly because most of our interviews were from people at Jose Manatee Park, the park that is about to be constricted by the Miami River Greenway. But major concerns also existed for pollution and overfishing because so much of the fishing efforts are concentrated in these spots. They're catching less and less fish over time. So how can fishing access be safely facilitated and secured for the fishers? So there are several things to do, a lot of things to do, but the most effective things would be to install signage with fishing and consumption guidelines to ensure continued fish populations and safety for the people consuming them. Another one would be to amend City of Miami Park rules to allow fishing, since it's already a public access area and people are fishing literally right outside the premises of public parks. It wouldn't make much of a difference in terms of safety concerns or anything. And additionally, it would be a good effort to coordinate efforts to ensure compliance. Since these sites are so minimal, there aren't that many sites to patrol. Additional measures would be to conduct outreach to promote safe fishing. But the real concern is that fishers, the burden of knowledge is on them right now. So they're fishing at these sites and there's no signage posted. So the burden of really finding regulatory and policy material is on them. So there's no access to advisory information or consumption guidelines at these sites, but many fishers are consuming very frequently when they visit these sites. And as you can see here on this chart, there are many fish. All of these were reported by them as being frequently consumed. And some of these have guidelines that say do not eat at all. And this is only concerning mercury, when in reality, there's many other pollutants that are in these fish that they are eating frequently. And to further support and ignite the issue that exists, here's the picture of the fish that was caught by one of our participants. As you can see, there are many, some of them being high trophic levels, so they surely have high levels of biomagnified pollutants. But you can also see some of the unhoused people, they really rely on the river as a site to clean their fish and prepare their fish for cooking, which they cook literally meters away from the river itself. So they're inherently connected to the water, and they are inadvertently eating many of the pollutants. The future step that I want to take with this project is I'm going to collaborate with some of the participants to collect some of the fish that they would eat. And rather than them eating it, we'll be using it to do an ecotoxicology study. And this study is going to be focusing on PFAS in the tissues of these fish. And I'm going to be focusing on crevalle jack because it's a high trophic level, and mullet because it interacts with sediments, which are historically polluted in the Miami River. And here's my contact information. Thank you to all the fishers and all the collaborators. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. All right, so now we have Carly Dario. Carly is a PhD candidate at the University of Miami, and she's going to be talking to us about public perceptions for coastal adaptation.
Hi, everyone. So going back on the perception train, but looking at from sort of an economic perspective, I'll be talking to you a little bit about how much people are willing to pay for different infrastructure projects in Miami, particularly along Biscayne Bay. So the next slide, please. Oh, just kidding. I have this one. Okay. Okay, so the main motivation for this study, as many of you may know, what has happened in the last 4 years is this project that was being proposed by the Army Corps of Engineers to protect Biscayne Bay's coastline. So that was a 20-foot seawall. And as we know, that project was rejected by many of our stakeholders, and a new feasibility study was being proposed to look at different strategies instead of this seawall. So fast forward to today, we're seeing that proposal being turned into multiple lines of defense. So we're seeing a proposal for elevated structures. We're looking at nature-based solutions. And I believe that report was just released in April. And so I highly encourage you all to go into the Army Corps site and to provide your feedback there. So this is where that study was really rooted on, and my interest is looking at the value of nature-based solutions. So we're talking about the monetary and non-monetary values. And now that we know that these stakeholders have rejected that plan, I wanted to dig deeper into understanding what were the particular attributes of these projects that people actually care about. So my research questions for this study was looking at 3 things. The first one was, what are the attributes of coastal adaptation projects that people care about? What are the project characteristics that people would like to invest in? The second is how much people are willing to pay for these coastal adaptation projects. So getting into that dollar value and understanding how much people are willing to invest. And the third is who cares and does not care about coastal adaptation. So I was interested in looking into what are the types of socio-demographic profiles that we're seeing in Miami-Dade County. So this was done through a survey. It's called the Choice Experiment, in which you are providing different scenarios to different people and asking them these different options. Would you be willing to select an option with a mangrove with supporting structures? Would you be willing to select a seawall or nothing at all? And so I don't know if you received this survey. This was sent online to about 681 Miami-Dade County residents, but the way it looks is it's in a table, and you are asked which option would you prefer as a function of different attributes. So we're looking at the project type, how high the project is, how long and how much protection does it cover, and how many days would this project sort of reduce flood frequency, and how much would it cost your household. So hypothetically, how much would you be willing to pay to fund these types of projects? And so the survey respondents would look at these different scenarios of different types of characteristics and make that trade-off. So would you be willing to trade off the cost? Would you be willing to trade off the height of the project? And we get on that dollar value to understand what exactly and how much exactly are people willing to invest in. So, and then you sort of just select the projects from it. So the first question that I aimed to answer was, what attributes of coastal adaptation projects do people care about? So this fancy equation here is just telling you that people's decisions are a function of these different characteristics. So they're thinking about, okay, where am I willing to support a mangrove, but is it going to be expensive to me? So you're thinking about those different scenarios, and people care about the type of project that's going to be implemented. So we do have evidence that people care about nature-based solutions. Another thing that they care about is the length or the amount of coverage that people want to see protecting Biscayne Bay. And of course, the cost. So people are willing to, are deciding on these projects for a lower cost and are less willing to support these projects for a higher cost. And so we're seeing this going to our second question is how much people are willing to pay. So this type of method sort of gets at those marginal or very specific dollar values. If you were going to ask them, what exactly do you value pertaining to these projects? And so if you were going to add only what was significant, which is the type of the project and the length, we're seeing that people are willing to pay about $18 a month, hypothetically, for a mile of mangroves to reduce coastal risk in Biscayne Bay. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that looks like in about 10 years, if we're willing to pay that amount, as compared also to the current feasibility report that the Army Corps has proposed. Another question, the final question that I wanted to ask was, who cares and does not care about coastal adaptation and why? And I know the graph might be a bit small, but one question we asked was, what are some of your beliefs that have influenced these decisions? And a lot, and as we see the climate, the general climate in Miami-Dade County is that people are willing to support coastal adaptation because of these certain statements, and I'll just breeze through them. Those who support coastal adaptation are thinking about future generations. They're thinking about how the project will benefit others other than themselves, and also are thinking about climate change. So that is sort of surrounding what is influencing their decisions toward this particular survey. And I wanted to also understand who are these people answering this survey, and who are they, who and how are they supporting these projects or not supporting these projects. Rather, they would not like to see these projects put forth. And I wanted to emphasize those who wanted to keep the status quo, and we're seeing those who are a little bit older and are in the low income spectrum. So, which does make sense in a sense that people don't want to pay for more or don't want to take it out from their household taxes, essentially. Another thing that we're seeing is that homeowners are less likely to support coastal adaptation, and who live further from the coastline and who have lived longer in Miami. So we're seeing this sort of attachment to the urban landscape of Miami-Dade County. And there are many studies that have looked at how climate change is changing the way we're looking at our landscapes today. And that is also influencing our decisions on whether we want to adapt to climate change or not. So in summary, we're finding that there is a growing preference for nature-based solutions. And this is a study that sort of documents that evidence. And my interest is really to document that evidence that could be communicated to different policymakers. And we're also seeing that there is support for coastal adaptation, particularly for nature-based solutions and for the amount of coverage that they provide. And for some people, coastal adaptation doesn't matter. And the profile that we're seeing are those who are a little bit older, who are in the low income spectrum, and who have a longer residency in Miami-Dade County. And I'm willing to have a conversation with you on that and to look into how that is true anecdotally. Talking also a little bit about how much people are willing to pay for these projects. So we're seeing about $18 a month. And if we're going to project that maybe in the next 10 years, so we've calculated it to about $180 million a year if we were only going to ask Miami-Dade County residents to support these projects through household taxes. But of course, we know these large-scale infrastructure projects are federally funded and or are cost shared by the county. But to compare this with the pilot nature-based solution project that was proposed by the Army Corps, we're seeing it is rather comparable, at least with the upfront costs that are needed to propose a nature-based solution project. So with that, willing to take any questions later on and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. So now we have Sam Van Leer. Sam is the founder and president of the Urban Paradise Guild.
Good afternoon, everybody. I will use the mic. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for coming out to the summit and for coming to my little talk here. We've been working in Miami-Dade for a very long time, but most people haven't heard of us because we're so busy out there walking the walk that we haven't had as much time to talk the talk. So conversations tend to be dominated by people who don't do much. Just a fact. So this is a recipe for healing Biscayne Bay. And what I mean by that is this is news you can use. The idea is to give you some of the background info that's going to be helpful for you all to make decisions in terms of what you support. So we've been protecting Miami-Dade since 2008. This is one of our earliest projects planting mangroves at Oleta River State Park. So up until the year 1950, people used to write this phrase all the time. There were so many fish in the water, it looked like you could walk on them. Now, that was applied to the bait runs, which is when there's a surge in fish, but you don't see that phrase occurring after 1950. What changed? Well, development changed. Killing mangroves changed. So fast forward to 2022. This picture, I think, was actually taken by our director of policy, who is in the room here. Sandy, raise your hand, please. And so this is a bunch of dead fish, and that's just horrible. The causes of that are multiple, but it's mostly algae bloom and essentially no oxygen in the water. So they drown in the water. The good news is there are traces that survive today. And this photo is a screen grab from an underwater shot at the Ace Preserve estuary. So we can heal the bay if we care. Hey, everybody's here because they care. If we understand, well, some more than others. And if we act. And that's the key thing. You're going to see, and you've probably already heard, that there's a lot of talk. And that frustrates me because I am a person of action. Well, if you look at my boots, it'll give you an idea. So this is what we're facing. This is the inputs that are killing the bay. We have nutrient pollution from various sources, fertilizer, agricultural runoff coming all the way from Lake Okeechobee, dog parks full of dogs pooing, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's murky water, and I'm going to get into that more later. And then at the bottom, there's sea level rise, heat, and acidification. That's all being driven by climate crisis. So this adds up to what I call the perfect storm. Extinct North Biscayne Bay. It's terrible. Okay, so now we get into what we can do about it. And what we can do really is, I think, what matters. So first of all, climate change, global climate crisis, GCC. We need to all be fighting the causes and effects of climate crisis. So how you vote is one of the most important things. If you have a candidate who denies climate crisis, kick them off the ballot if you can. Also, it matters if you support candidates early if they are pushing for meaningful change. Please do. So beyond that, though, sea level rise, we can manage sea level rise to a degree by what's called managed retreat. In other words, we accept there are areas that can't be defended. So we manage our stepping back from the coastline with care. So you want to reduce pollution? Well, you remove the stuff that's going to be polluting before the sea level rise reaches that point. And then for heat and we treat systems. So the stronger the ecosystem is, the more it mitigates the problems that our critters face and ecosystem and everything. Okay, so nutrient pollution is the big one. Oh, before I forget. So we have plans for the mitigation. We have plans for the managed retreat. This is part of what UPG does. Okay, nutrient pollution. So what happens is nutrients flow into the bay, and it's like a buffet for algae. Population explodes. It sucks all the oxygen out of the water, and the fish drown in the bay. They are swimming and they're drowning, and that's horrible. Note the little frowny face. Okay, so nutrient pollution has solutions, and that's the good news. So you probably septic to sewer and the fertilizer ban and all that stuff. These are things that our government is doing. These are wise actions, and that's awesome. It's not enough. It will not be enough. So one of the things that we're working on is what's called water polishing. And water polishing essentially uses natural systems to cleanse the water, to remove the nutrient pollution from the water. Plants are one way, but soil itself functions as a nutrient absorber. So we have plans for this, and we've got big picture plans. The cool thing is that the water polishing can also be a solution to other problems. It can be a solution to habitat loss. It can be a solution to food systems, things like that. All right, and then there's seagrass. Seagrass is just an amazing so full of life, it's a critical estuary. And we have ideas for moving forward with restoring seagrass, but there's a catch. This right here is one section of the bay. It has 79th Street at the north end and Julia Tuttle Causeway at the south. So this is what I call the wounded bay. Everywhere you look in the bay, the areas that are marked in red are either disturbed or dredged or channels. So all the islands that you see, all the coastlines that you see are artificial, virtually all of them. And so when they were creating, let's say, North Bay Village, they had huge dredges that collected material from the bottom of the bay and piled it up inside the seawalls. And that's what built North Bay Village. Everywhere you see seawalls, artificial. And seawalls are a huge problem. So what happens is that these unhealed wounds are bleeding sediment into the bay, and that creates the murky water. That's the material. And what a lot of people aren't aware of is that the murky water, probably the biggest component in that is clay. There are clay deposits all over the and bleeding. Now, during the COVID break, there were multiple reports from trustworthy sources saying that the bay cleared up. It became crystal clear. So what does that tell us? That tells us that humans are the problem here. In other words, if we take humans out of the equation, the bay can heal itself. The problem is that, well, we really can't take humans out of the equation. It's kind of messy. So we shouldn't do that. And it's just not realistic. On the other hand, if we moderate how we utilize the bay, we can change things. And so there are problems is big boat wakes. So the big boat wakes create unnatural waves, and any wave flowing across the bay that hits a seawall bounces back like light bouncing off a mirror. And it goes across the bay and hits the other side and bounces back and forth, then back and forth. And so it maintains the turbidity in the water. All that turbulence keeps that clay sediment suspended in the water, and it just can't settle. So the bay can't heal itself if we keep on screwing it up. So we need to make better choices. Now, right now, this is something that I've been watching happen my whole life. This is the downward spiral of murky water. So what happens is, in deeper water, there's more shade. So you can look at this thing here where in shallow water, you're good to grow. Deeper down, there's less light coming in. So you know how grass doesn't grow under shade tree? The same. But by the time you get down to the bottom, nothing's alive there. And so the problem is that the more seagrass we kill, the more sediment ends up in the water, and the more murky the water becomes and the shadier it becomes, and therefore the more seagrass we're killing. So there are hundreds, thousands of acres of seagrass in the bay that should be part of the solution, and we're killing it. So we need to look at things differently. So bay calming is one of the things that we're working on. We're developing solutions. You've heard the term living shorelines. So we've planted, oh God, like 8,000 mangroves so far. And it's a really cool thing to see a mangrove that's 20 feet tall that we planted. We got a lot of them, and they're all doing their thing. And you know what? Still not enough. We need a lot more. So what we need to do is carry out these kinds of projects that will calm the waters of the bay, that will intercept those waves. So if we have mangroves along the shoreline instead of seawalls, or before the wave reaches the seawall, it hits mangroves. Well, the mangroves break up the waves. We can have rough coastlines that absorb the waves, and then if it reflects, it goes in multiple directions. So we can have mitigation of seawalls. That's what I call it. And there's a lot more. So we're developing plans for these things. All of these solutions are possible, but the reality is that more is better. So no wake zones is something that the county has initiated a study on, which is wonderful. Reality is that we'll see how that goes. So there are barriers to no counties put a riprap coast wave energy. Next, I'm going to talk about a recent discovery that our organization made. So our treasurer and his husband discovered a previously uncharted patch reef right off of South Beach, off of South Point. And it hasn't really become known because it's outside the swim buoys. So people tend to swim out there and they've got this sort of desert of sand. And once you've seen one structure, stop going. Well, there's an old patch establishing itself in early coastal nourishment programs. I hate the term, but oh well. They actually mined the reef. They used it as a source for beach renourishment. They killed a lot of reef. Well, it's been healing itself ever since. And so this is just one example. And here's another example. Big brain coral. So at a time when we've got brain coral that are bleaching, we have healthy corals right offshore. So what we're looking for are people who want to help us protect that reef, and a lot more. So we're looking at doing water polishing projects as far inland as Hialeah. That can be part of the solution set. So it all connects. So we call this, oh, and this is where the patch reef is. So it's an extraordinarily beautiful thing. And for those who heard Louis Aguirre speaking about it, he went diving on it yesterday for the first time, and it blew him away. It would blow you away. Oh, and you can snorkel there too. Okay, yeah, it's the green. So what we've got here are along the jetty, there's a sort of a snorkel trail. Then there's the surfing zone. We made sure we talked with our friends at Surfrider to make sure we would keep their surfing zone in good shape. Then there's the reef line, which is garden. And then offshore of that is this string of patch reefs. So what we're doing is launching the Land Bay Reef Partnership. We want to connect the dots. We need to actually be the agents of change because, honestly, we've been waiting for government to do this stuff and it ain't happening. Or if they're doing anything, it's in super slow-mo. So we don't have time for that. Climate change is on us. It's now climate crisis. So we need to get our act together as a community, and we need to become agents of change. So what we want to do is reestablish all those resilient relationships through the watershed that benefit people and wildlife. So you can join us. So anyway, you can also join us as a climate apprentice. And so we are hiring. We got funding from AmeriCorps, partial funding. And so we are taking applications right now. It's a summertime program, and then we'll reboot it in the next year starting in October. Or sorry, in the current year starting in October. So let us know if you want to help, and please do share this with people, because well, we need people who give a damn. Oh, and it was super cool that we were featured on the front page of the Miami Herald. So if you're ready to be the change, here's some cute little QR codes that you can use for change. So first of all, if you are with an organization, a government agency, a business, a nonprofit, a faith-based group, a community watch group, a neighborhood organization, join the Land Bay Reef Partnership. If you want to just get involved and volunteer, go to our UPG onboarding for our volunteer programs. And that's our Climate Active Pledge. All you're doing is saying, yeah, I'd consider doing 3 hours a month. Anybody here got 3 hours a month? Yeah, all right, awesome. And then climate apprentices, what I already talked about. And then finally, donate. Money's good. We need it. We really need funding. And so you can donate. And of course, if you know sources of funding and resources that you'd like to connect us with, that would be lovely. So do we have time for some questions? Albert. Partnership, yeah.
How to mitigate the impact of the pathway study infrastructure into the bay. And it sounds like this LPRP is a perfect off-ramp.
Yeah. Yeah. We would love to be a part of that. The main issue is with funding and credit. So it's really important that we have the funding coming in to offset our costs for our climate apprentices who, oddly enough, like to eat and get their rent paid and stuff. So we need to take care of them. Let's see here. So other questions for me? Otherwise, I think. Yes, Lynette. Yeah.
Could you?
Sorry. So
Oh, do you want me to repeat? Okay. Okay. So Lynette with Fertile Earth Warm Farm. And I just wanted to thank you for actually mentioning soil, because nobody has mentioned soil. Nobody mentions its connection between soil and water. Nobody mentions that that's how nature cleans water, is through the soil. Soil has high cation exchange capacity that actually sequesters nutrients. So my question is, why isn't that part of the conversation? And I will absolutely donate compost to your project.
You absolutely accept compost for our project. Thank you. So there's a really good reason why people don't talk about soil in the equation. It doesn't make them any money. You're going to notice that a lot of the stuff here that's being presented, especially by the sponsors with tables, it's all designed to monetize the response to climate crisis. It's not necessarily designed to do the best thing with the money. It's designed to maximize profits. So that's why. Questions for these good folks?
Good afternoon. They're great folks, but Sam, I have one question for you, and I kind of know the answer, but I don't want to assume that everybody else does, and you have these beautiful plants here. Can you explain the role of using native plants for green infrastructure and cleaning the water?
Thanks, Sandy. She's our director of policy, so she's a little biased, but she's awesome. Okay, so all of these plants can potentially absorb nutrients. They represent basically upland and coastal ecosystems, depending on the one. But what we've got here is Havana skullcap, which is an endangered species. We plant that especially in Hialeah. It's a great teachable moment for folks. We've got scorpion tail, which grows into a beautiful shrub. Of course, it can absorb nutrients too. River sage. These are all plants that are happy inland, away from the salt. And then we've got necklace pod, this beauty here, which is, it can handle salt, it can get flooded, and it's, the saying, it takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Then we've got this right here, which if I could have brought one in bloom, I would have. It's a seaside goldenrod. And then finally, it wouldn't be complete without our friendly mangrove. So yes, with us, it's always take your mangrove to work day. So mangroves are awesome, and they actually will absorb more carbon. I think the figure is 1.5 times the carbon that a comparable tropical hardwood tree would. So 150% better, and that does not include the sediment in the mangrove swamps, which is carbon intensive. So they're like the amazing carbon sink that you want to have. They are also the panacea, the solution to most of the bay's problems. Anywhere you see seawalls, they probably killed these to put in the seawalls. So we need more of all of these things, and where they get planted depends on what's suitable. But we craft ecosystems. They call this green infrastructure. I call it green defenses, because I think it gets to the heart of what we really need to have happening in the bay and around the bay. So we're looking at doing water polishing as far inland as Hialeah, I hope. And right in the bay, there is so much that's possible. So you're going to hear a lot of people do the doom and gloom thing. Yeah, there's a lot of gloom. There's a lot of doom, no doubt. But let's get to work. Let's do this. So any other questions? We done? One more question. And remember, we got other folks here who would probably love to answer your questions. Okay. Tropical Audubon.
Super quick question for Carly. I was struck by the fact that it's the in the category of the people who don't necessarily care were homeowners. And I would have, I guess, expected the opposite, that people who own property here would care about climate resiliency into the future to, protect their investment. And so I was just kind of wondering if you had any insight into like why that was the case and that you were seeing that.
So it's not part of the study, but I do have another study that actually looks at the barriers and opportunities of living shorelines, especially for homeowners, right? And so what I find, at least with practitioners working with homeowners, is that usually they work with contractors who are building along the shoreline, and the interests are, to build docks and, for recreation purposes. But so there needs to be more education for homeowners to understand that in order to protect the coastline, you can have alternatives like living shorelines. So other than that, another thing is that, you've lived so long in Miami-Dade County that you have this urban landscape that hasn't changed for a while, and people's baselines have changed so much from what we probably knew years back when Miami was all agriculture. And today, all we know that it's a big city. And so that familiarity with that landscape is something that could potentially be detrimental to the way things are moving, because people are just so used to Miami being such a big tourism city, and to see different changes along the coastline is a change of culture, is a change of the way things are, the way we are used to.
And I'd like to add in the reality that the people who are homeowners tend to be older. And so her findings, and were pointing that people at the elder end of the demographics may not be as open to these realities.
Wonderful. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists?
And I have business cards right here. Come and get them if you need them. Thank you.